If you've been watching our weekly updates over the last few years, especially during impeachment, I highlighted the fact that President Trump was absolutely right to ask Ukraine about the Joe Biden corruption issues and Burisma. And little, I'm sure, did President Trump know at the time just what string he was unraveling. And it helps explain, these new emails do, the desperate coup impeachment against President Trump, that they were willing to blow up our Constitution to protect Biden from this terrible, from the consequences of his terrible corruption. And you can be sure Obama knew everything that was going on. You can be sure. First up, though, is the Joe Biden scandal story that's come out as a result of disclosures of what is reported to be Hunter Biden's laptop to the New York Post, specifically, I think, through Rudy Giuliani. So the story is Hunter Biden dropped one or more laptops over at a store or a repair shop up in Delaware, computer repair store in Delaware, and he left them there. So essentially, he abandoned property that it becomes someone else's property. And the guy running the store reviewed it. He saw evidence of criminal activity and other troubling things and ran to the FBI with it. And it took some pushing and shoving with the FBI, but then the FBI finally, or specifically the Justice Department, issued a subpoena for the material in December of last year. So they've had this material that you've read about in the news this week since December, the deep state DOJ and FBI have. And he also turned it over to Rudy Giuliani and company, I think Steve Bannon as well. And so they got it to the New York Post, who started reporting on the material from the laptop, purportedly, of Hunter Biden. And the documents and the emails and the text are, they confirm the worst possible activity by the Biden clan in terms of converting the vice president's office into a piggy bank for the family, and specifically Joe Biden as well. Now, you may recall Joe Biden said he had nothing to do with his son's business. Well, there's an email suggesting that a top official at Burisma sent a text or email to Hunter thanking him for getting a meeting with Joe Biden. Now, the Biden campaign distractedly, said something about Russia did it, which is ridiculous, and said there's no meeting in any official records, any official appointment schedules of the vice president. But then they told Politico, it's not to say an informal meeting didn't take place. They couldn't rule that out. But if a meeting took place, it was only cursory. So in essence, they're confirming in a backhanded way a key element of the allegations. The other emails show there's two sets of stories, maybe even three sets of stories, that a Chinese communist company gave Biden all sorts of money, and include just tens of millions of dollars, looks like $10 million, maybe upwards of $30 million, just so he could provide introductions. I mean, completely. If that's not an indication of fraudulent and criminal activity, I don't know what is. They were selling Joe Biden's office. Other text messages sent by Hunter Biden suggest that he gave half of everything he was getting to his father. He called Pop. Other emails suggest that he talks about saving some of the money he was getting from the Chinese for the big guy. And that strongly is implied to be Joe Biden, though we don't know that for sure. So what has been the reaction of the major media to this? Suppression, censorship. You had unprecedented censorship by Twitter. They were blocking users, preventing people from linking to the URL, the web address for the New York Post story. Unprecedented. The New York Post is, I think, the nation's oldest newspaper, if not one of the oldest newspapers, founded by Alexander Hamilton. I think it's the fourth biggest newspaper in the United States. They got this material Journalistically, they thought it was good enough to run, but Twitter thinks it's not good enough, and they cut it out. They censored it in an unprecedented fashion. Facebook similarly did the same thing. They throttled it back, they call it. So it made it difficult, if not impossible, for anyone to share it till their fact checkers figured out whether it was good enough for Facebook. This is unprecedented intervention in the election campaign by Twitter and Facebook. It's false and deceptive business practices because they tell you they have a hands-off approach, right? Other than illegal, objectionable material, things like that. Twitter said it was hacked. They don't allow hacked material, which is baloney. First of all, it wasn't hacked. It was a computer left behind that the person lawfully took control over because it was abandoned property. It wasn't hacked at all. And of course, it doesn't prevent left-wing Twitter from allowing people to go in and look at news stories in the New York Times about the president's purloined tax returns or illegally obtained classified information. How do we know that wasn't hacked? Are WikiLeaks leaks prohibited from being linked to by Facebook or Twitter? All of that was hacked, stolen. I was the subject of a Washington Post story, one of the subjects of a Washington Post story this week, where they went to a private meeting I was attending. I was making a presentation about the voter fraud, according to the Washington Post, and they got the video. Of course, they took out of context and dishonestly reported about what I was talking about, but it was based on a video they had no right to of a private meeting that I didn't give them a permission. I didn't give my permission for them to use. Is that the same as being hacked? Sounds like it to me. Twitter isn't throttling that back. Facebook isn't censoring that. Everyone talks about Section 230. Section 230 is a section of federal law that essentially has been interpreted by too many courts to grant absolute immunity for Twitter and Facebook to do this type of garbage, illegal, illicit censorship. And Section 230, I encourage you to go and read it, and you'll see it that provides them no immunity like that. They engage in deceptive business practices, make up and falsify information about why they're doing something in terms of their business. That's not protected under law. And they just can't restrain communications based on someone's content, political content, mainly to help Joe Biden while hurting Donald Trump. We all know why they're doing it. So this has been a serious attack on the Republic, as I say in our book that's coming up, The Assault on the Republic, this time by private entities. Because Twitter and Facebook have outsized influence. I know they're private companies. But their activities have a public impact. And certainly they should be held accountable to the law for their misconduct and deceptive business practices. If a company said they were all of a sudden changed their policy to target someone politically and came up with a after the fact excuse to lie about it, Securities Exchange Commission might come in, Federal Trade Commission might come in, the Department of Justice might come in. So I think all of those agencies, including states' attorney generals potentially, should be investigating Twitter and Facebook for their suppression of information shortly before a key election to help one of the candidates, Joe Biden. So you can be sure, though, separately, censorship won't stop Judicial Watch. We already have sent out Freedom of Information Act requests for these particular emails to the relevant agencies, text messages, other documents. I don't know what's on that computer. Supposedly, according to Rudy Giuliani, the documents on the computer evidence tens and tens of millions of dollars in money laundering and bribery schemes, benefiting, among others, Joe Biden. China, Ukraine, Russia. And I told you, didn't I? I told you they were very nervous about Biden. Why? Because I've explained, if you've been watching our weekly updates over the last few years, especially during impeachment, I highlighted the fact that President Trump was absolutely right to ask Ukraine about the Joe Biden corruption issues and Burisma. And little, I'm sure, did President Trump know at the time just what string he was unraveling. And it helps explain, these new emails do, the desperate coup impeachment against President Trump, that they were willing to blow up our Constitution to protect Biden from this terrible, from the consequences of his terrible corruption. And you can be sure Obama knew everything that was going on. You can be sure. There were reports about Biden and the Biden family trading on Biden's name during the Obama administration. Even in impeachment, they talked about the concerns they had about Burisma. We just uncovered emails showing that it was a long-standing concern, the emails suggest, in the Obama administration about Biden and Burisma. They were so desperate that you had the Ukraine embassy, run by anti-Trumper Ambassador Yovanovitch in 2019, monitoring the social media accounts in violation of the law, it looks like, specifically asking, figuring out what were people talking about Biden and Burisma. We uncovered that. So go to the New York Post, go online. The story has gotten out there despite efforts by Twitter and Facebook to try to censor your right to know through their deceptive and illicit business practices. I've told you before, they've censored Judicial Watch, and they're going to be censoring all sorts of things related to the election as we get closer. It's not going to stop. It's going to get worse. Because Facebook is of the opinion, and the big tech companies are of the opinion that if you question why it is they're counting ballots for weeks after the election, you'll be censored. If you raise questions, valid ones, about voter fraud, you will be censored. Facebook isn't allowing Judicial Watch to pay for any advertising after the election. We can't talk. I think we can post stuff, but we can't pay to promote it. So other Americans, our job is to educate people. So our advertising is designed to educate people. But we're not allowed to do that until, quote, a president is selected or confirmed. The winner is confirmed. Well, how's that going to be? So we're not allowed to talk about that process. It's called putting your thumb on the scales to help Joe Biden. That's what this is about. You saw it with this is the worst. This is the most significant threat to our right to know that I've ever run across. I mean, I always thought it was the government we had to worry about. Here we have, it's the left was smarter than that. The left took over the corporates, big tech companies that we now all rely on to communicate and share information and gain access to news about what our government's up to. And they said, well, we don't need to control the government. We just need to control those companies. And there's been pressure from Hillary Clinton, George Soros, Democrats, journalists, the left. They've been pressuring these companies since the get-go to suppress conservatives. And this is what has happened. You thought it was about Russia. It was never about Russia, because they began this little game pretending they needed to make sure the Russians weren't interfering with our elections. First of all, anything they were doing online in 2016 was immaterial to the election. And they all knew that. But from the left's perspective, anything critical of Obama, Biden, Hillary, or their agenda was Russia. And that was the entree. And now it's disinformation. which of course only conservatives, I guess, engage in, right? This is a nightmare for the freedom of speech. And Section 230, if you keep on, you'll keep on hearing this, doesn't need to be changed. It doesn't need to be rewritten. It just needs to be enforced. I encourage you to review Justice Thomas's dissent in a case that was issued this week. Maybe we can provide a link to it. It's hard to find because you'll pop onto the document from the Supreme Court site and you'll see just lists and lists of cases they were taking or not taking. And at the bottom of the document, I think, is Justice Thomas's dissent. And as I tweeted out, his dissent is a shot across the bow of big tech, because he suggests that Section 230 has been wrongly interpreted, because the plain text is plain, to allow them to engage in improper censorship and other misconduct. And it doesn't. It doesn't. So Judicial Watch is going to do the heavy lifting in terms of investigating Joe Biden and this new scandal and pushing for the truth online about it. So I understand there's going to be more information breaking, and so keep on watching. Keep on watching.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.